Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's NAC at Home program, our conversation with the legendary impressionist, Mr. Rich Little. My name is Charles Snyder, and on behalf of the Roundtable Committee of the National Arts Club, welcome. The National Arts Club is a 501c3 nonprofit. We are based in New York City, and our mission is to stimulate, foster, and promote public interest in the arts. How do we do that? We do that by offering 150 free programs to the public, including art exhibitions, theatrical performances, lectures, and readings. Visit us at nationalartsclub.org. And now, the National Arts Club is privileged and honored to welcome Mr. Rich Little. Mr. Little is the master mimic of more than 200 voices, arguably the most famous impressionist in the world, and has delighted audiences all over the world, including at the White House. Mr. Little has shared stories, jokes, and anecdotes in the voices and mannerisms of icons such as Cary Grant, Jimmy Stewart, Johnny Carson, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Carol Channing, every president from John F. Kennedy to Joe Biden, and many others. Just recently, from August till September here in New York, Mr. Little portrayed President Richard Nixon in the What If off-Broadway play Trial on the Potomac. Then Mr. Little returned to the stages of Las Vegas, where he is tonight, and performing at the Tropicana Hotel. Mr. Little has written a very funny book, which we will discuss, and is also an accomplished portrait artist. At the end of this conversation, I believe Mr. Little has got to head to the Tropicana Hotel, so the National Arts Club is very grateful for his time and is honored to welcome Mr. Rich Little. Hello, sir.
Hi, Charles. How are you?
Fine, thank you. And again, on behalf of the club, thank you so much.
Well, I'm still alive.
Well,
Still working after all these years. Yeah.
I had the good fortune of seeing that last month. I did go to Trial on the Potomac.
Yeah.
And my guests and I loved it.
Right.
We had a great time. And actually, my question for you was something that they asked me. They said, for you, was acting as President Nixon, talking to other people, debating with other people, exchanging ideas with other people, was that different than impersonating Richard Nixon?
Well, I did impersonate him, but it was a serious play. It wasn't a comedy. And I think a lot of people, or some of the people that went to see the play, thought because my background is comedy, that it was going to be a comedy. But it wasn't. It was the trial of Richard Nixon that never was. And if there was one, what would it be like? And that's what we showed. And then at the end of the play, we don't come to any conclusion. We let the audience vote whether he's guilty or innocent. And I thought it was a very interesting way to do the play, because we don't really say he was innocent. We don't really say he was guilty. You make up your own mind.
That was a very fun aspect of it for everybody in the audience to fill out the card and vote guilty or not guilty. And I'm delighted to share with you from your performance, my party all found you not guilty.
Oh, really?
Yes. So,
Do you think that was because they liked me, or do you think they were being realistic? I don't know.
no, mixture of all that, but we loved it. So.
Well, that's great. That's great. I enjoyed doing it. I really did. It wasn't a big success because of COVID. We didn't draw many people, but the reaction from the people we did draw was really incredible. And we might have continued it if we were doing it at better times, you know? And it worked out fine for me because I had to get back to the Tropicana in Vegas, where I have a long-term contract. So I had to get back to work there. So I couldn't have continued even if we'd done that well. I really couldn't have stayed with the play.
Well, I thought about that. I saw, that you were returning back to Las Vegas. You were going from New York City and returned to the stage in Tropicana September 9th. So everything I've read about that show, I mean, that sounds like it's a lot of fun for the audience and a lot of fun for you.
Mm-hmm. Well, we had a great cast, wonderful actors. They really were top notch, and it was a pleasure working with them. It really was. They were very professional, and I was kind of sad when I had to leave. There were a lot of tears, but I guess a lot of shows that fold, there's a lot of emotion, and I just thought it was a great experience for me, so I don't regret doing it at all.
Well, I know the Tropicana Las Vegas is happy to have you back, and the Las Vegas crowd is happy to have you back. That sounds like a very fun show.
Yeah, well, it is. I've been there for over 5 years, and it's an easy gig for me to do because it's only 25 minutes from where I live, and I only do about an hour and 10 minutes, and so it's works out perfectly for me.
I believe in that show that you referenced some of your friends that you made in this wonderful book that I enjoyed so much. I enjoyed that every friend that you made, from impersonating him or her, you devote a chapter to them. And one thing that I found fascinating, you write in the book that you were successful impersonating famous people, but then when you started writing original material, then that was almost a different art form, that really was something different in your career. Could you tell us a little bit about how you decided to start writing new material?
For my act, you mean?
Yes.
Well, I'm always trying to improve my act, and thinking up new routines, and looking at old clips of some of the shows I've done in the past, and putting them in my act. I show a lot of the real people in my act. I mean, I talk about George Burns, and then I show me with George Burns. I talk about John Wayne, I show John Wayne talking about me. So it's a combination of me doing impressions and a lot of film clips from previous shows that I've done down through the years. And I've been very fortunate to work with some of the biggest stars in the business. And I write about a lot of them too. And it's kind of sad to think that most of them are gone. My act is deceased.
I'm not kidding. I couldn't, I couldn't set this down. But I love the story that you told about when you were on the Judy Garland show, and what a significant, important appearance that was. But I started laughing out loud when you said that you discovered 20 minutes before going live that your trousers were still at the dry cleaners.
Well, they weren't at the dry cleaners. My manager went to pick up my suit that was being pressed before the show, and on the way back to where we were recording, the pants slipped off the hanger on the street. And so when he showed up with my suit, I said, "Where's the pants?" And he said, "Well, they're hanging with the jacket." And I said, "No, they're not." Oh my God, I've lost the trousers. Now we're 20 minutes from filming the show. And so I tell Gary Smith, the director, I've no trousers. And he thought I was being funny. And I said, "I'm going to have to do my spot without any pants." And he thought that was hysterical. And I said, "I'm not kidding. I have no trousers." Right. So we got a hold of a page. We got a hold of a page that was about my size. And I wore his trousers on the show. They were a little short, but nobody knew that, you know.
Yes, you mentioned that in the book too. You say that the trousers were a little bit shorter than the fashion at the time, or how you preferred your pants, but you do what you got to do. So
Yeah. You know, if you watch that clip today, of course, you don't see anything below my waist, so you really can't see that they're too short, you know.
So that was just one of the many funny stories. What I also thought was so special about this book were some of the photos. I mean, you had, photos of you with Cary Grant, Lucille Ball, George Burns, Jack Benny, to whom you were very close to. But then also there were pictures of you with Dolly Parton and Liberace, and there was one epic photo. It was you at Frank Sinatra's 70th birthday party. And that just looked, the stories that you could tell about a night like that, I'm sure you could write another book just about that.
Yeah. Well, that was a great moment for me at Frank's. I forget what birthday was it? It was at Caesar's, and I think it was his 50th year or something. And I was one of the performers on the show, and Cary Grant was sitting right down front. And so I came out and I said, "Good heavens, it's Cary Grant sitting right here. I don't believe it. If you really are Cary Grant, let me hear you do your Cary Grant." And I put the microphone down to him and he said, "Well, what do you want me to say?" And I said, "Oh, that was pretty good. Now can you do Burt Lancaster?"
Yeah.
Got a huge laugh. It was a great moment for me, and it was ad-libbed, I knew he wasn't going to say much more than that. So Cary Grant was very shy. He was a great movie star, but he didn't want to do anything live because he thought he would screw up, And I said to him, "You're a professional." "Oh, no, movies are my thing. I can never do anything live." And I remember the AFI, the American Film Institute, wanted to honor him. And he said, no, I could never do a thing like that. And so I said to him, "Well, why don't you do it?" No, Rich, I can't do it. And I said, "Well, listen, why don't you do this? When they introduce you and you come up to the podium, I'll come up with you. And I'll stand next to you. And then you'll look at me and I'll say, 'Oh, thank you very much.' And then we'll leave." But it never happened, but it would have been a funny moment.
It said those ad-lib moments in the book you describe more than one time where you were performing in Las Vegas, or sometimes on live TV, and there would be a friend of yours, one of the celebrities out in the audience,
Right,
who would come up to you, and they would sound like some of them would beg you to do them. They wanted to hear you to do them. So it just sounded like a lot of fun to have these special relationships with some of the absolute biggest celebrities at the time who were going to every one of your shows.
Yeah, well, I remember when I was at the Sands way back, Hubert Humphrey, who I loved, he was a wonderful man and a great sense of humor. And I got to know him. And he came to see my show at the Sands. And I did him, of course, in the show. Little Hubert Humphrey, who talked like this, very clip. And he saw my show and he wasn't convinced that I changed things because he was there. He thought I went easy on him. And I said, no, I do this every night. No. He said, "No, Rich, I knew you knew I was out there and you went easy on me." And I said, "No, I didn't. No. I don't believe you. I think if I came back again, we would see the real show." and you'll kind of put me down. I said, no, I would never put you down. Anyway, he didn't totally believe me, so he came back the next night in a disguise. And the maitre d' phoned me and said, Hubert Humphrey's back, and he's sitting at the back, and he's wearing a hat, and his collar is pulled up, and he looks like Humphrey Bogart, and he's tried to sneak in, but I recognized him. And he wanted to see what I did, when he knew I wasn't there, It was so funny because he never really was convinced that I had done the same act every night. He was a fascinating man. I loved him.
Your book has such warm stories about, again, it is every top performer in Hollywood. So it's just a delight to read. Something that I found so interesting, sir, was that you were doing quite a bit of work for television and movies when an actor couldn't finish their lines, or there was editing that needed to be done, or dubbing, that they would turn to you.
Right. Well, if they passed away, and that happened a few times. I dubbed Peter Sellers' voice for a couple of Pink Panther movies after he had passed away. And I did David Niven, too, who had lost his voice. He had Lou Gehrig's disease, and I did him for The Trail of the Pink Panther and The Curse of the Pink Panther. And I don't think anybody knew that I did that. But, and I did Gene Kelly for a Christmas special. He lost his voice. And I did the voice of Gene Kelly for for this Christmas special. And Gene had this very high kind of voice.
Right.
And he was easy to do, but nobody knew I did that. And then when I watched it, it looked like he was really talking, but it was me doing him. And nobody ever knew that. I once dubbed for Tony Curtis, who walked off a movie in Europe because he wasn't paid. And they came to me and asked me if I would dub some lines so they could put this movie out. And I phoned Tony and I said, what do you think? And he said, well, Rich, if they pay you, I think you should do it. But if you do it, you owe me half your salary. And I did it too.
That's just a fascinating. What a privilege and what an interesting need that you were able to fulfill for movies that would have just been stuck otherwise.
Yeah. Well, I've done a fair amount of that in my career, dubbed for actors who were either lost their voice or were sick or passed away, I did Stacy Keach, who was doing Mike Hammer way back, and he was in The Slammer in England. And I dubbed 3 or 4 Mike Hammers. And that was tough because I really couldn't imitate him, but I managed to make it sound fairly convincing. So I've done a lot of that during my career.
Something that you talk about more than once in the book is how you can sing as someone and hit notes in a range that you yourself don't have, yet if you are singing as somebody, you can pull it off. Tell us a little bit about what it's like singing as one of them.
Well, I do a lot of singing impressions. That person behind you, Sammy Davis Jr., I do him in my act. And I do a bit that I did 20 years ago, and I've revised it. I'm doing it today, and it's very topical. And Sammy goes, "Who can beat their women? Whip them with a sheet, looking like Darth Vader from their head down to their feet. The Taliban can. Oh, the Taliban can, because they're a bunch of wackos from Afghanistan."
Yeah, that is certainly an update to Sammy Davis Jr.'s famous.
I did that 20 years ago when the Taliban were in the news all the time, and then we thought we got rid of them, and now they're back stronger than ever, and that fits back in my act. It's amazing. Never throw anything away.
But speaking about Mr. Sammy Davis Jr., it was such a delight to look through the artwork that you have available as prints. Where and how did you discover this talent as a portrait artist?
Well, I used to sit on the streetcar of all things when I was a kid, and I would draw people on the streetcar and do a little sketch of them. And then before they got off the streetcar, I would give them my sketch. A lot of people tore it up or let it fall on the floor, but some of them kept it. And so I was really doing sketches of famous people or not famous people since I was about 15 years old. And I've done a lot, and I've got a lot of like Johnny Cash, I hear the train a coming, it's rolling round the bend. And of course, Gene Kelly. These are just some of my sketches. And Arnold Schwarzenegger and Vincent Price and Clark Gable. Yeah. Now see here, Scarlett. Atlanta's not burning. That's the Braves. They're playing a night game. So I've done about 200 sketches, I think, in my lifetime of famous people. And then I show them a lot in my act. And when I imitate somebody, I show the picture that I drew. So my show at the Tropicana is me doing impressions and showing a lot of my art and a lot of film clips from shows that I did years ago. And that's basically what my act is.
My God, that is just such a wonderful combination of talent. I'm just so, again, amazed and impressed, and I think the audience is so delighted that would you call yourself a self-taught artist? I mean, did you really just teach yourself and practice?
Well, I guess I started to do the voices so I could imitate people, and I guess I have them in my head, and I could draw them as well. So it was just being so into the person I was doing that, as I said, I could imitate them and draw them, and they're very close when you think of it, because all those people are in my head somewhere.
Now, have you shown your artwork in an exhibition ever before?
Not really, no, I never have. I could, that would be interesting. I did one time at the Magic Castle in Los Angeles, where they do magic, and it's quite a place. And I had a little show there about 10 years ago, and I showed my art and did the impression as I showed it. And then we sold some when the show was over. So that's the only time that I've ever really done anything with my art commercially, was at the Magic Castle.
Well, again, I had a tough time deciding on which celebrity. I like them all. I admire and I love them all, but I chose Mr. Sammy Davis Jr. for my collection. And again, it was just so wonderful to see a drawing in the chapter about each of the celebrities and friends. So do you give them away as gifts? Have you given any of them to your?
No, I was until COVID came along. I was selling a lot of my sketches when my show was over, and people were buying them, and they were also buying a lot of my old television shows too. And then the money we made went to the Wounded Warriors, and I've been doing that for years, and I probably raised thousands and thousands of dollars for the Wounded Warriors down through the years, because anything I sell when I perform, I give to the troops. Very rewarding for me. I'm very happy to do that.
And bravo for that good work. I I know that you also do a lot of work for children's hospitals.
True.
And certainly many civic organizations in Canada
True.
have benefited from your generosity. Tell us a little more about your charity work.
Well, it's mostly the Wounded Warriors at the moment, but I've done things in the past for the homeless and for children. And I think when a person is successful in the business, they should give back. And the way to thank everybody for your success is to try and help those less fortunate than you are. And so that's what I do. When I have a spare moment, I do a lot of charity work. But I can't do everything. And once you start doing that, you get calls from everybody. And so you have to kind of limit it to things that really interest you. And I've been doing that most of my career.
Well, bravo. You talk about that in the book. We have some questions from our guests that I'd like to ask you, but you are revising this book, and do I understand correctly, this book is going to be republished with some new chapters?
Yeah, some new chapters and a new cover, and a lot more promotion that we had in the past. So it's coming out in about 3 weeks to a month, the new book.
Oh, you will have some advance orders. As I read this one, my only regret was that it was over. I just wanted to keep hearing about some of the other stars and celebrities.
That's why I added a couple of new chapters. I kept thinking, I should have talked about so-and-so, and I didn't. And there were a few people that I really admired and worked with that I didn't mention in the book, and now they're in there. I didn't have Don Rickles in the original book. And then I wrote a couple of other chapters about other things that I'd done that were not mentioned. So it's going to be re-released, and I hope it does better this time because it never was reviewed. My book was never reviewed by anybody.
I thought it was magical. Again, I couldn't put it down, and I could talk to you for as long as you give me to just hear some of the many stories that you share about everybody from Jack Benny to how many times have you visited the White House, for instance? You could write a book just about how many times you visited the White House.
Well, I was there a lot when Reagan was president because we became very friendly, and I loved Ronald Reagan. He had a great sense of humor, and he loved my impression, And I remember one time he said to me, Rich, I think you do me better than I do. As a matter of fact, Rich, you do me so good that I was thinking when I pass away, they should bury you.
Yeah, that's a pretty good line.
He was very funny, Ronald Reagan. He loved comedy, and whenever I would go to the White House to perform or just there socially, I'd have to tell him a couple of jokes, and he'd write them down too. I remember one time he did some impressions for me. Reagan did impressions of Jimmy Stewart, which was not really that great, but I didn't say so. He did John Wayne, which was fair, and he did Truman Capote. And it was so funny to see the President of the United States doing Truman Capote. I could still see him in my mind, rubbing his eye and doing his impression of Truman Capote. And then he said to me, Rich, I love to do Truman, but I don't know what to say. And I gave him a joke. I said, well, Mr. President, I do a joke on Truman Capote in my act. You're welcome to it. He said, really? I said, yeah. Well, wait till I write this down. And he got a Secret Service man and wrote on his back the joke. And he said, what is it? And he was writing away. And I went, a lot of people think that I wrote in cold blood but that's not true. Actually, I wrote in ink, which he thought was hysterical. And he wrote it down, he put it in his pocket, and then he said to me, I can't wait to try that out on Gorbachev, which I thought was very funny. Could you imagine Ronald Reagan doing his impression of Truman Capote for Gorbachev? I mean, I can't even imagine that. He wouldn't know what the heck he was doing, you know? But he probably did. I don't know. I'd give anything to see that.
Oh, it sounds like you were a witness to history there. I mean, many times with again all the places that you were and all of the people you met. It must be a lot of fun writing about all of the celebrity friends.
Well, you know, when I came along and did the Dean Martin roasts, which helped my career a lot because I did 24 of those. I was the youngest person on the dais, really. And that's why I'm still alive today. I mean, all those people that did the Dean Martin roast, except for maybe Ruth Buzzy, I think they're all gone. You know, I have a picture on my wall, a wonderful picture that was taken after the Frank Sinatra roast, Dean Martin roast, and everybody posed for the picture. And I have it hanging in my hallway. And you see about 20 of these great celebrities, and they're all gone. I know there's just Ruth Bovey and I that are alive in that picture. And it's kind of sad to see that, you know. I mean, you've got Gene Kelly and you've got Orson Welles and you've got George Burns, Jack Benny, Don Rickles. I mean, they're all gone, you know. And so it's kind of sad to look at that. And I think to myself, I guess 10 years from now, somebody will look at that picture and say, I don't know anybody in this picture. Who are these people?
Oh, God.
Kind of sad, isn't it?
Hope not. One more question before I share with you a couple of the questions from the audience, sir. You mentioned Don Rickles, and you talk about in the book, you know, he one of the funniest men on the planet.
Yes, without a doubt. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more about working with him.
Well, Don was a rare human being. He had an interesting mind. And so did the other one that had the same kind of mind was Robin Williams, you know. They were never really stuck for an answer, you know. Don's mind was going all the time. He was not only, as he was talking, he was not only thinking of his next line, but the one after that. And he, you know, there was no hesitation. Most comics today, when they're trying to be funny, have to think for a couple of seconds to think what they're going to say. But Don was just rapid fire, and so was Robin Williams. They were in another planet. They really were. They were, and Don, there was nobody like Don because he attacked everybody, but everybody knew that he did it with love. So nobody really. Well, a few people objected, but not many people objected. And one thing about Don that was interesting was he was never blue, ever. I never heard Don say damn or hell or anything like that. He was pretty clean. I mean, he went after you pretty good, but he was not blue at all. And a lot of the comics today are very blue. You know, some of the roasts that you see that they do today really are quite disgusting in a way because, you know, the language is unbelievable, but that's the way it is today, you know.
Well, thank you for that anecdote. Your chapter about Mr. Rickles is also very funny in the book.
Don would say to me, Rich, if you ever found out who you are, you'd probably want to be somebody else. You're a pain in the ass. Why don't you go back to Canada? Hump a Mountie. Anyway.
Oh, I must share with you some of the questions that we've received. A member of the audience wanted to know what was an impersonation that you found very easy to pick up, and what was one of your more difficult, and perhaps why?
Well, the most difficult person for me to do is the one I can't do.
Oh, of course.
There's a lot of people I can't do, but a lot of the film stars of today are very tough to do. It's almost impossible to imitate Brad Pitt or George Clooney, or Matt Damon, because their voices aren't that distinctive. One thing about back in the 40s with Humphrey Bogart and Clark Gable and John Wayne and Jimmy Stewart, they were larger than life and usually played themselves on the screen, and their voices were very distinctive. But the actor today, there's a lot of actors today that just aren't that distinctive, and you just can't find the hook to imitate them. So, you don't do them. But, I'm always looking for new people to do, but it gets tougher. I'm doing Joe Biden right now, and it's tough because he can't even do himself. But but he's a good subject, Joe Biden. Hey, man. Hey, you chumps out there.
Yeah. Yes, it's like,
My name is happy birthday to me. Happy birthday to me. Joe Biden. Joe Biden. Now I'm going to take a press conference. Thank you very much.
well, that's what everybody's just so happy to hear that there are still voices out there for you.
Not as many as there used to be, but there are. Once in a while, somebody will come along that I can imitate. Some people I can pick up very quickly. I remember after seeing Dr. Ruth, you remember her years ago on TV?
Yes, I remember the show.
I think I could started to imitate her the moment I heard her.
Because, she had that Dr. Ruth Westhammer, sex is a lot like air. It's not important unless you don't get any.
We had another question. Actually, we've had this one twice or three times already. Was there any celebrity who asked you to stop impersonating them, or whom you had to ask permission to do?
Yes, Paul Lynn of Hollywood Squares hated my impression. Absolutely hated it. And I write about it in the book. Paul was kind of a sourpuss. He really was, and an alcoholic, unfortunately. But apart from that, he was very funny. Very funny. Drunk or sober, Paul was always funny. And I loved to imitate him. And every time I would do him on Hollywood Squares, they would cut to a shot of his reaction, and he'd make a face and say, "How's he doing? Who's that? That's disgusting. Get a day job. You're pathetic." And I thought he was going to strangle me one night. I really did. Come right over to my square and strangle me live on TV. He hated my impression that much, But he was funny. I'll give him that. He was funny. And he kept Hollywood Squares going because people watched it because of Paul Lynn. But I can always remember Paul. We'd have a dinner break. We do 3 shows, have a dinner break, and then do 2 more shows. And he would drink so much on the dinner break that when he came back to finish the last 2 shows, he was bombed out of his mind, totally.
Yeah.
And they had to strap him into the square, And he still was funny.
Right.
Drunk or sober, Paul was always funny. You never knew whether he was drunk or not. He just had that sour look, and some of his one-liners were hysterical. I remember some of them were a little sick, but they were funny. Like I remember one night Peter Marshall said, "Paul, can blind people go skydiving?" And Paul said, "Oh God, no! It scares the hell out of the dog."
Yeah, that is a fast, sharp, and funny man.
Yeah, he was funny. Yeah.
We had one last question for you, sir. A couple members of the audience have asked, for whatever, who would you say is one of your most favorite or beloved impersonations, and why?
Well, I would say Reagan, and of course, Jack Benny was a very, very lovable, kind, sweet, gentle man with no ego at all. George Burns, I like to do him. Johnny Carson. Johnny was interesting to do. And I remember when we did the roast on Johnny Carson on the Dean Martin roast, I did all his mannerisms and in front of him, and he got a great kick out of it. And it was one of the better roasts that I did, the one on Johnny Carson. You can buy all those roasts today. I think there's about 50 of them. You know, I did 24 roasts, and my favorites are the Jimmy Stewart. That was a great roast, and then the one to well, let me think. Don Rickles was funny, and the one they even did on Dean Martin, he roasted himself. That was a very funny roast too. Yeah. Dean was an interesting guy, Dean Martin. He had not a care in the world. Dean, nothing bothered Dean at all, you know. Even when things screwed up, Dean was still funny, you know. He never looked at the cue cards ever before the show started. Everybody else looked at the cards. We wanted to know what we were saying. But Dean couldn't be bothered. And then on the show, he'd get so screwed up and he didn't know where the heck he was, but he was always funny. I think he was at his funniest when things went wrong. I really do. He was a very interesting guy. He was not social at all. And if you got more than 3 or 4 words out of him, you were doing well, you know. He kept to himself pretty much. So did Johnny Carson. He wasn't very social either. Johnny was 2 people, really. On the air, he was charming, funny, fast, quick-witted, had that boyish quality that people loved. But, you know, off the air, he was very remote, hard to get to know, and not very friendly, really. It's interesting. There were 2 Johnny Carsons. I can remember him sitting on his porch in Malibu, because I lived in Malibu for a while, and I used to walk down the beach, and I'd see Johnny sitting on his porch, waiting for his new wife to walk by, and but I would get a wave or maybe a couple of words out of him. That would be about it, you know.
And you guest hosted more than 10 times. You guest hosted quite a few times.
23 times.
23
yeah.
times.
Yeah. I hosted the Tonight Show, yeah. And I had on a lot of the people that I admired. You know, I had Jimmy Stewart on, and oh my gosh, I had a lot of Jack Benny, George Burns, a lot of people that I admired. And I have a lot of those shows in my collection today. And, you know, because NBC never kept any of those shows. They erased over them, a lot of them, you know, and they're gone. But luckily, I taped a lot of the Tonight shows, and I have a lot of them. Otherwise, they wouldn't exist.
That's miraculous. I remember I had read about that oftentimes up until I forget what the date was, but NBC would take over the previous night's shows. So that's like the holy grail of television that you have.
Yeah, a lot of stuff was lost. A lot of great radio shows from the past were lost because they needed the tape, and they just taped over the show. And so some of the classic shows are gone, you know, of the past. It's kind of sad to think that happened, isn't it? Yeah. But as I said, I when I was on the Tonight Show and anything I did on TV, usually I taped it at home on my own recorder. And so I have a library of a lot of my stuff that I tape myself, you know, because the studio doesn't have them.
That's wonderful that you have that. I know you've got to get to the Tropicana. We had someone ask, would you please tell us what was it like working with Judy Garland?
Judy Garland. A great experience for me, and she was very nice to me, and we got along great, although I didn't see much of her because she never came to rehearsal. And that was to my benefit that she never came to a rehearsal, because when I did my routine on the Judy Garland show, she saw me doing the bit I was doing for the first time. And so her reaction was genuine because she had never seen me earlier do this routine. So if you watch that today, and I have portions of it in my act, but if you watch that today, you just look at her. You don't even look at me. For her reaction is incredible. Every impression I did, she reacted to.
And then when I did my impression of James Mason, she absolutely adored this man. And because of my impression of James Mason, I was able to get on the Judy Garland show.
That's the truth. She loved James Mason that much. And when she heard my impression of him, that's when she booked me on the show.
Oh, that's
I went up to James Mason a couple of years after that to thank him. Me
Right.
stupidly not thinking he would know what the hell I'm talking about.
yeah.
I went up to James Mason. I said, Mr. Mason, I want to thank you for getting me on the Judy Garland show. And he looked at me and he said,
What the hell are you talking about? I don't know you, and I don't know anything you're talking about.
excuse me. He walked by me.
Well, Mr. Little, we here at the National Arts Club want to thank you for your time, your generous time tonight with us. It has been a pleasure and an honor to speak with you.
Thank you very much, Charles. I appreciate it. Had a good time, and I'm glad to talk to you, really. So, and I hope people when they come to visit Vegas will come and see me at the Tropicana.
Yes.
I'm there 4 nights a week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Fantastic. And also, I'm personally looking forward to when your book comes out again. That will be,
I'll make sure you get a copy.
Well, thank you again, sir. And when you are in New York City, please let the National Arts Club host you and guests to a meal, drinks, and a tour.
Okay, we'll do that. Thank you, Charles.
And to all of our guests and audience tonight, thank you for joining us for this very special conversation with Mr. Rich Little. If you'd like to learn more about the National Arts Club, contact us at admissions@thenationalartsclub.org. And we wish you a very good night.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye now.